Wrangel Island is located in the Arctic Ocean, 90 miles northeast of mainland Russia. In 1921, a small crew set off for this desolate place. They thought they'd be there for a year, but nature had other plans. The mission was doomed from the start, and the crew would perish one by one until a single member remained. Ada Blackjack, the only woman and non-explorer on the team, survived against all odds. This is her incredible story of resilience. The Wrangel Island expedition began with a daring motive. The plan was for a group of 5 settlers to claim the island for Canada, led by Alan Crawford and funded by the infamous Arctic explorer Vilhjalmur Stefansson. Underneath the leader Alan Crawford, the team included 3 American men and Ada Blackjack, an Inuit woman, part of Alaska's indigenous population. It was agreed that Ada would not participate in the grueling Arctic survival activities of exploring, hunting, and hard physical labor. She was recruited to cook and primarily sew furs for the men. In exchange, she hoped to earn enough money to care for her sick son back in Alaska. Born in 1898, Ada had a difficult life even before setting foot on Wrangel Island. As an Inuit woman, she grew up in Alaska, but her childhood was spent in a Methodist mission. The environment at these missions was typically structured around education and assimilation into Western culture, which often meant that indigenous children like Ada were distanced from their traditional ways and family structures. She married young, but her husband, Jack Blackjack, abandoned her and their son Bennett, who had tuberculosis. Ada was forced to put Bennett in a Methodist home for children as she lacked the resources to care and provide for him in his fragile state. She became committed to finding a way to make enough money to reunite with her son. A local police chief was familiar with Ada's situation, and he mentioned to her that some men were recruiting Inuit to join them on their Arctic expedition across the Chukchi Sea to Wrangel Island. Ada's seamstress and homekeeping skills could be just what the team needed to sew and maintain warm fur clothing and take care of daily tasks like cooking. She wasn't trained to survive the wilderness, but she needed a way to provide for her son. Ada signed up for the expedition, and the crew was happy to have an experienced seamstress, as furs would be essential to their warmth and survival. Ada then learned about the objective of claiming Wrangel Island for Canada. At the time, there were competing territorial claims between Russia, Britain, and the US. Countries wanted Wrangel Island for its strategic position in the Arctic, offering potential military value and control over emerging sea routes. There was also the allure of potential natural resources and the desire for national prestige in the race for Arctic exploration and territorial expansion. The island's remote location made formal claims difficult, so Vilhjalmur Stefansson, who organized the expedition, believed that by sending settlers to occupy the land, they could effectively establish Canada's claim under international law. In the case of the remote and icy Wrangel Island, planting a flag and maintaining a settlement, however small, was a symbolic and legal means of asserting sovereignty. The Wrangel Island expedition set sail from Nome, Alaska, on September 9, 1921, aboard a ship called the Silver Wave. It took the crew roughly a week to reach Wrangel Island, located about 600 miles northwest of their Alaskan port. They arrived on September 15, 1921, and were left by the rest of the Silver Wave's crew to survive on this remote Arctic island. For the first few months, things went as planned. They set up a camp consisting of a few large tents. Initially, things went well, and they survived the first winter by relying on their supplies and hunting local game, such as seals and foxes. They used driftwood and other materials they found on the island to reinforce their living quarters. They survived the harsh winter with ample supplies, and when summer came, there was plenty of game to hunt. But the situation would soon take a turn. As fall was setting in a year later from when they had arrived, there had been no sign of the promised rescue ship. Unbeknownst to Ada and the team, Teddy Bear, the ship that had been sent to return them, had encountered impassable ice patches and was forced to turn around. With no way to communicate with the outside world, the team had no option but to endure in this remote, soon-to-be frozen wilderness. As the Arctic winter returned, the crew's situation grew desperate. Food supplies dwindled, and the crew was unable to kill enough game on the island to survive. To make matters worse, Lorne Knight, the strongest of the men, became severely ill, likely from scurvy. After assessing the desperation of their situation, the other three men, Alan Crawford, Fred Maurer, and Milton Gall, decided to risk everything. They left Ada to care for Loam and set out across the winter Arctic ice pack to Siberia, hoping to bring back help. They left on January 28, 1923. Although this was the dead of winter, bringing below-zero temperatures and whiteout blizzards, this was the only time the ice pack could potentially be frozen enough to connect them to the mainland. The journey was 90 miles, but the conditions would have been near impossible. The shifting ice patches could have left impassable patches of Arctic water to block their route, and unfortunately, details of this attempt are not available. The brave men were never seen again. Now, Ada was alone with Lorne, who was bedridden and barely hanging on. She took over all the responsibilities of the camp, hunting, gathering firewood, and keeping Lorne alive. Day in and day out, she tended to him while also fighting off the threats of starvation and freezing temperatures. Lorne's illness made him irritable and accusatory, often berating Ada despite her tireless efforts. On June 23, 1923, after months of fighting illness, Lorne Knight passed away, leaving Ada completely alone on Wrangel Island. After Lorne Knight passed away on June 23, 1923, Ada Blackjack found herself utterly alone, with only one other team member to keep her company, the camp cat, Vic. Ada Blackjack did not move Lorne Knight's body out of the tent after his death, due to both physical and emotional hurdles. Physically, she was already extremely weak and suffering from early signs of scurvy herself, which made it difficult for her to perform demanding tasks like moving a grown man's body. Emotionally, Ada had cared for Knight for months as he deteriorated from scurvy, and his death was a deeply traumatic event for her. She was also isolated and afraid, which likely contributed to her reluctance to move his body. Instead, she zipped him up in his sleeping bag and erected a barricade of wooden boxes around him to protect his body from animals, particularly polar bears. She then moved into a storage tent to avoid the smell of decay. This decision highlights both her resourcefulness in a desperate situation and the heavy toll the experience had on her mentally and physically. Despite the overwhelming isolation and unimaginably harsh conditions, Ada was forced to take over every aspect of survival. She moved into the supply tent to escape the smell of Knight's decaying body, building makeshift fortifications around her living space to protect herself from polar bears. She even constructed a raised platform to spot approaching bears and scare them off with her rifle, skills she had reluctantly learned during the expedition. Ada showed remarkable ingenuity during this time. She used leftover supplies and driftwood to craft tools, a gun rack, and even a makeshift skin boat to aid in hunting seals. Despite her inexperience with firearms and her fear of polar bears, Ada managed to fend off threats and sustain herself by trapping birds, foxes, and seals. She also reinforced her winter clothing, repaired the tent, and collected algae and lichen to stretch her meager food supplies. She even became proficient with the team's photography equipment and captured pictures of herself around camp. In her spare time, she sewed moccasins for her son Bennett, which she hoped to give him upon her return. During these 2 months of complete isolation, Ada maintained her resilience by focusing on her goal of reuniting with her son. This determination kept her alive in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Finally, on August the 20th, 1923, Ada's long ordeal came to an end. A rescue party, led by Stephenson's associate, Harold Noyce, arrived on Wrangel Island. They were shocked to find Ada alive and the sole survivor. They were astonished by Ada's survival skills. They noted that she had adapted so well to the Arctic that she might have been able to survive another year on her own. Ada Blackjack's return to civilization should have been a moment of triumph, but instead, her story was overshadowed by the failure of the expedition and the deaths of the men. Stephenson tried to spin the story in the media, downplaying Ada's survival skills and focusing on his own reputation. Ada, however, did not seek fame. She wanted only to reunite with her son. With the money she earned from the expedition, Ada brought Bennett to Seattle for medical treatment. She remarried and had another son, living quietly in Alaska until her death in 1983. Ada Blackjack's story is often referred to as the tale of a female Robinson Crusoe. But her story is so much more. She was an ordinary woman thrust into extraordinary circumstances, who survived through sheer determination and a desire to return to her son. Her resilience in the face of overwhelming odds has made her a true heroine of Arctic adventure. Thank you for watching. I hope Ada Blackjack's journey serves as a powerful reminder of the strength of the human spirit. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe, and let us know in the comments which survival story you'd like to hear next. I hope to see you next time.